Well, what are we being sold about these ICE deportations? It would certainly seem that we're being promised only to deport, these violent criminals that have raped kids across the United States, and they're being shipped off by the Trump administration. And I think we would all, rally around that idea that they're going to be shipped out of here, send them back to Venezuela or wherever they're coming from. We see the violence that's happening right now, specifically in Chicago. So yes, get them out of here. But then you have videos like this emerging of this Turkish woman being arrested while on a legal student visa, and being arrested because, well, allegedly just because she supports Palestine. What's going on here? Watch this video. So they come here and round her up. They're all wearing face masks.
None of them are in uniform.
None of them are in uniform. People, they're yelling from the window like, hey, who are you people? Like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you putting on face masks and hiding yourself? I guess for security reasons. I don't know. And then we had this yesterday with Kristi Noem, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary, standing there. Watch this. Yeah, just watch this. Here she is in front of all of these tattooed.
I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally.
So is that just playing to Trump's base? Hey, look, we've got a bunch of bad guys in prison behind me. Like, these are the visuals we're putting out here. What's really going on here with due process? Joining us now is John Kiriakou. He was a whistleblower about Gitmo. And recently on Redacted, he had said that there's no way we should revive the Gitmo policies. So he's obviously the first one we wanted to talk to about this. CIA whistleblower John Kiriakou joins us now. John, good to see you. First, let me get your thoughts on when you see Kristi Noem there standing in front of all of these tattooed prisoners for this photo op. What did you make of that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be back. And what you're asking really is a set of very important questions. Like you, like most Americans, I'm thrilled that dangerous criminals are off the street, right? If you are a criminal, and I don't mean just the act of crossing the border, although that is a criminal act. If you are perpetrating acts of violence in the United States, we don't want you in this country. And so, great for President Trump for throwing them out and incarcerating them in, as it is right now, in this super prison in El Salvador. What Kristi Noem did was just really a play to the base, having all those shirtless deportees behind her, showing their gang tattoos that so many of them have. That's perfectly fine. I have no problem with it. But the act of essentially kidnapping PhD students or graduate students, people who are here on green cards or on legitimate education visas, because you don't like their views on the Palestine issue, or because in this case of the Turkish PhD student, she wrote an op-ed in support of Palestinian human rights, not in support of Hamas, in support of Palestinian human rights, and then deporting them, I think, is just plain wrong. Whether we like their politics or not, they still have the same constitutional protections that the rest of us have.
Well, Guantanamo Bay made us an unwilling participant in torturing people without due process. And that's one of the things that you and many others have spoken out about. So then it makes me very uncomfortable to see this group of banditos, right? And you're wondering, okay, are all of them bad guys? Do we know that? And is there some kind of, will we be fooled again? I'm not saying that I stake my claim on Tren de Aragua's civil rights, but how do I know
Right.
this? Is this going to happen again? Because it has happened before.
Oh, you're so right. The bottom line here is that none of these people have been convicted of a crime. They look like criminals. They're covered in gang tats, sure, but they've not been convicted of a crime. So deporting them is one thing. You heard Kristi Noem say, and I wonder if this was a slip of the tongue, we thank the government of El Salvador for taking our terrorists, she said. Mm-hmm. Nobody's ever accused any of them of terrorism. And not just that they haven't been convicted of it, they haven't even been accused of terrorism, and she's calling them terrorists. So you make a very strong point here. They haven't been convicted of a crime. Either we should just call them deportees, or we should give them the benefit of facing their accusers in a court of law.
Yes. Yeah. I would like them to be brought to justice. Absolutely.
Someone in our chat room here on Rumble says, wait a minute, you guys are worried about illegals' rights? All of a sudden we're worried about illegals' rights? Please.
No, I'm worried about the stories that we heard out of Guantanamo Bay, where there were people who were just dads, fathers, stuck there, starved, put in containment for hours on end.
Years
for
under
years on end,
under Dick
and had
Cheney's
never done
roundup.
anything, and we were told they were terrorists. We were sold this before on this show. We don't buy stuff just because the government says so. I'm sorry, I didn't ask you a question, but
this is where I differ so greatly with Dick Cheney, and I think the two of you probably do as well. Dick Cheney once said, quite famously, that he would rather incarcerate 100 innocent people than to let one guilty one go free. And I'm exactly the opposite.
Yeah. Okay, let me think of that ratio. Then let one guilty.
So let's talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's happening, and I don't know if this is being blown out of proportion or not, but I am very troubled by the idea of people, because they have a certain viewpoint about a certain country that you can't speak about, that you're being rounded up and you're being thrown into some sort of non-due process facility just because of your political thought. Like, this is exactly what the Trump administration fought against. This is what the candidate Trump fought against. And I just don't understand what's happening. And it's deeply troubling to a lot of us on the conservative side who are watching this happen.
Oh, yes, exactly right. You know, I'm worried. I actually think about this now. Are my thoughts, are my own positions mainstream enough that I'm not going to be harassed? Thank goodness I'm not here on a green card, or thank goodness I'm not a PhD student or a master's student here on an education visa. Because if I take a position and I publish that position, or I speak publicly about it, and it's not in the mainstream that's supported by, senior officials in the government or the Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, am I going to be snatched off the street like this Turkish woman was because of her thoughts? Her crime is in her brain. It's her thoughts are not pro-Israel, and that warrants deportation. That's not the American way.
Phil Rondo in our chat says they were not rounded up because of political thought. They were being paid. So now that's a good question, right? If you're like a paid agitator that's causing problems, well, where's the gray line here, right? If you're being paid to carry out some sort of violence and attack people, or to set fire to Tesla factory or whatever it is, right? Then that's a whole other ball game. But
that's different. That's a crime.
Yeah,
she wasn't.
Then the government should make that case. The government should make that case publicly.
The government should make that case. You're exactly right. There's no evidence that this woman was paid to write an op-ed in support of Palestinian human rights. And even if she was paid, I get paid to write op-eds in support of one thing or another twice a week. Does that mean that I should be deported because somebody out there in YouTube land doesn't like my political positions? That's not the American way. That's not what the Constitution of the United States has promised us for the last 250 years.
So it's not cut and dry, right? Because the argument is, well, you're a citizen, John, so clearly you're protected under the Constitution.
But the Supreme Court has said that anybody in the United States, legally, of course, as has been decided subsequently, anybody in the United States has the same protections as an American citizen.
Yeah. So what I'm worried about is the juxtaposition of these stories is, on the one hand, we have this obvious, propaganda standing in front of these shirtless dudes. Yeah. It never occurred to me whether or not they're normally shirtless, until you just said that. But yeah, why did they all take their shirts off because she asked to show their tattoos? And then on the other hand, look at this, but not that. And so are we being invited to celebrate something in order to distract us from something else? And that feels fairly obvious to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the case. There seems to be some real worry on the part of the administration as to what is happening on university campuses. And I think that's dangerous. If you want to withhold education grants, that's one thing. That's a political debate that we can have at any time. But if you're trying to squelch thought or diversity of thought because you don't think you're going to agree with the other person's position on an international issue, that is just plain wrong. And, why, as Americans, should we worry about whether or not the Israeli government has its feelings hurt?
Yeah.
Right. I'm so sick of why we need to walk on eggshells for another country. We wouldn't do it for any other country. And I'm just so sick of it. I mean, if you have an America First policy, why are we walking on eggshells for other countries? I don't care if it's China under the Biden administration and their love of China. I don't care if it's Israel. I want America first, and I'm sick and tired of this, like dancing around it.
Agreed.
Well, John, thank you so much for this. I mean, a lot of people angry on both sides of this debate. As you clearly, we clearly see here. I guess we'll kind of watch how this unfolds.
The thing, I just want to say this one other thing. I understand the people in the chat who are like, these are bad dudes. Why do we care about their civil rights? I get that, right? But we are trying so hard not to swallow war propaganda. We are trying so hard to learn from the mistakes of our past. The reason we're putting your face here on this show right now is because we learned the lesson from Guantanamo Bay. And so can you just reiterate one more time the reason you were targeted by the government and the message that the whistle blew?
Yes, I was targeted by the Obama administration, one of 8 whistleblowers in national security targeted by the Obama administration. I said that the CIA was torturing its prisoners, which was illegal. I said that torture was official U.S. government policy. And I said that the policy had been personally approved by the president. Now, the president at the time was George W. Bush, and he didn't prosecute me. Barack Obama prosecuted me. So listen, I think it's the duty of every American to keep the honest people honest. And when you see evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, illegality, or threats to the public health or public safety, by God, you have to call it out.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Thank you so much for that.
A lot of great comments in the chat. I appreciate all the feedback. I mean, this is why we do a show live, because it's great to be able to see what everyone thinks, and people saying this is not war propaganda. Puke 12 says this is not war propaganda. This is people who've been here illegally and have hurt our citizens. You want to take that one, John?
Maybe some of them have, but again, we're Americans. And what we do as Americans is we charge people with a crime. We give them the opportunity to confront their accusers in a court of law and to be judged by a jury of their peers. And I'm unaware of any of these people having been accused of a crime other than the crime of entering the United States illegally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a lot to go through on this. I appreciate it, John. Great to see you here today. Thank you so much, as always.
Great to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing, they cross the border, they're committing a crime, right? They come across the border, right? That's a crime. So then they're being deported and rounded up and taken out. It's another thing when you have like a university student with a green card. What evidence? Someone said in the chat, well, there's clearly evidence they wouldn't have rounded this person up. Well, what evidence?
Yeah, they should have to prove it.
And I'd love to see what that is.
If they don't have to prove it, then you want to live in a society where the government doesn't ever have to prove its case against you.
Yeah.
That's Orwellian. Again, read 1984. And the idea that, all of these people did bad gang crimes, drug crimes, what have you, that we saw in that video, that might be so. They should face a court of law. They should have the book thrown at them, right? Oh, the problem that I do want to acknowledge, though, is that a lot of these governments are antagonistic to the United States. So if we send them back to Venezuela, we know that Venezuela is not going to prosecute them, and then they may just end up right back here. I get that this is a problem, right? And that there's a problem that needs to be solved here. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but we need to ask the questions, again, so that we're not complicit in another Guantanamo Bay type situation. So I appreciate your comments very much.